I've lived 1,000 lives. I've piloted 1,000 souls. I've killed and fought at night just for another role.
This is the Happy Jacks RPG podcast, a roundtable discussion that's a mix of friendship, humor, unbridled enthusiasm, and tabletop RPG topics sent in from around the world.
Just for another role.
Hello, and welcome to Season 35, Episode 9 of the Happy Jacks RPG podcast. My name is Kimmy,
My name is Riley.
and in today's episode, Rick asks about gaming groups without anyone who wants to GM. And Eric from New Jersey asks how to learn an IP world fast. And from the archive 2019, Falco from Germany calls out our pro-PBTA anti-D&D content from 2019. I'm not going to say anything about that. Okay. So, if you'd like to contribute a question or story to the show, email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. Or you can post in the mailbag channel of our Discord, which you can find at happyjacks.org/discord. Announcements. Our next game days is March 29th. It's free to everyone, and you're all welcome to join at happyjacks.org/discord. There's always a great variety of games. Currently, I think there's 9 posted, and some of them are full, some of them are not, but it's always just a wacky, strange variety of everything from very trad to like playtest story games,
Nice.
and everything in between. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's very safe. There's required safety tools in place for all games, and yeah, it's just a good time. So if you want to go play something on March 29th, join happyjacks.org/discord, or if you're already a member, go back and sign up for games. It's fun. Indie Designer of the Month. Our indie designer is Jean-Luc from the Dungeons Key. You can find his work on DriveThruRPG by searching for it, and you can also find it on thedungeonskey.com. You can also find them on thedungeonskey.social for bsky.social for Blue Sky. There's no good way. That just doesn't. There's nothing yet. So usually I just say like the thing on Blue Sky, and hopefully people know to like add the bsky.social.
Bisky.social.
Bisky.social. I don't know.
I keep thinking about changing mine to be just myname.com because I have that domain, but I haven't done it yet.
I keep thinking about it too, but then I'm always like, I feel like that make it harder for people to find me because everyone assumes that I don't know.
Maybe.
But I guess everyone searches. It's probably, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's not a right answer yet. All right. Today's product that we're talking about is Drifting Offline, a death in space adventure. Your team finds itself drifting offline at the Messier Belt. It's been weeks without a bite. Suddenly, the dashboard on the subspace auditor begins to blare. It's go time. Out of the portside window, you watch as the fabric of space-time folds, then unfolds. Then a gargantuan machine appears out of the window. You panic, start the engines, kick a pulse, and punch it. But your ship whines in the faint glow of a tractor beam as it's swallowed. Is this how it ends? With a total of 14 rooms spread across 3 levels, Drifting Offline has you exploring the inside of the M-class harvester that has swallowed your ship whole. Where did it come from, and how will you escape? Race against the adventure while defending yourself against deadly artificial intelligence. Will you make it out alive?
Oh.
And you can find that for $10.47 on thedungeonskey.com.
That sounds exciting.
It's very good, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
Yeah. I love, I have a fond spot for games that are just like what they are.
Yeah.
So like Death in Space. I love that it is as presented. It is Death in Space, but then there's like lots of flavors on how you do Death in Space.
It's like 10 Candles where it's like, there's definitely like a structure to it, but you can make it whatever you want it to be.
Yeah,
You get fun with it. So
Just
you
very,
can play the same game over and over again, and it'll be different every time you play it, which is what's fun about it.
yeah. It's also cool, I don't know, I love the idea of someone else designing all these things that I can then explore. I don't know. It's fun.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I will read the first email.
Thank you.
All right, mailbag 1. Hello, Jackers. I generally just passively listen, but I heard your call for emails, and something actually came up. Our group has been going for 8 years online with 3 people rotating through the GM chair. A few months ago, the person who was GMing for us hit some hard times and is too depressed to continue to GM. We respect that and want them to be happy, so another person stepped up and we went back to a setting we had hoped to do as part 2 of someday. It started off well with lots of excitement, but things started to tangibly taper off. Finally, she admitted that her heart just wasn't in running the game anymore, and with life changes, it was too hard to focus on. She would continue if that was the only option, but would like us to move on if we can. Given all that is going on in her life, perfectly understandable. The other person who was GM'd in our group recently was married and went from being a bachelor to married stepfather of a young girl. We can hear him talk to her sometimes. He is doing great. That divides his attention somewhat, though, so he feels he can't GM anymore. The other member and I do not like running games, so it feels either I do gaming night. It feels either I do or gaming might end. I find GMing to be super stressful and not fun, but objectively my life is probably in the most steady place in the group, so it seems like it should be me who steps up to me. But I am also very busy too, just with lower stakes, and I don't know when I will find time to prep. It's been requested we play something with more rules. We've been playing Blades and PBTA, which while I like playing games like this, I don't know if I can run one, and don't these take even more prep? We'll talk about that. Is there any way to make all of this easy? Thank you for all you do. No need to make this priority. We will, Rick.
We will.
We're doing it right now.
Right
We're making
now.
it the first email tonight.
Yeah.
I don't know when this was mailed in, so maybe it wasn't a priority. I have no idea. This might have been 2019. We have no idea. So I hope you solved it if it was. No need to make the priority. I would probably figure this out, but I figure this is something groups go through. Rick, it is something that groups go through. And you didn't tell us to drink, but I'm going to drink it.
Drinking, yes. Yeah, I've been in groups. Currently, even actual play groups have this same exact problem sometimes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, look, there's 2 really quick, simple answers to this, which I think we can get into. We can also talk about more about it. But I think that the easiest solution, if you have a group that really wants to play and nobody wants to GM and you can afford it, is to hire a GM. It's not that hard to do. There's like playinggames.com and stuff like that where you can start playing games.
Yeah.
And there's other similar kind of services. I would say the next best thing to that is that you have access to the Happy Jacks Discord. And if you go on the Discord, you can probably find somebody on that group who would be more than happy to run a game for you. And so I think those are the 2 options I would say in the broad respect are to hire a GM and pull your money to pay them, or go to a gaming community that you're part of and you're an active member of, or become an active member of a gaming community and find people who are looking for games that they might want to run. And in this particular case, I say Happy Jacks because it's a great community and you're already part of it, it sounds like. So those are the 2 suggestions I would say. It's like join the Discord, join the Discord and find people that way. Or if Happy Jacks is not the vibe you're looking for, then something else. But it sounds like you do like this vibe. But those are my 2 big options. Like I don't think that you, Rick, it does not sound like you want a GM. And I think that if you try to GM unhappily, I think that you will end up being as burned out as the other 2 people are, or frustrated by it, and nobody's going to enjoy that game. And not only will the gaming group end, but you might also get into like some fights and resentment, and you don't want that. So those are the 2 easiest solutions in my mind that I can think of. But I'm open to hearing more thoughts. But
No, yeah, absolutely. Like, hiring a GM is, like, it used to be such a strange foreign idea. I remember when we first started talking about it on the podcast, like, years ago. Like, I guess I would... And it was one of those things that was such a strange idea because it hadn't really been normalized. The only people who were being paid to play games were people on stream sometimes. Like, I think at that point Critical Role was around, and so it's like, oh, some of these famous people can get paid to play games.
yeah,
But normal people can't. But I think it's something that's become more normalized and much easier to access.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I have a bunch of friends who are really great GMs, DMs, do a bunch of different systems. That do it online very successfully, and it's very cool. I made an account one time and then was like, no, I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
But I think I agree. I think you need to have like an honest like kind of like breakdown of what's happening with your group. It sounds like, and this is always hard when it happens, that your play group might just be breaking up.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like it's from anybody doing anything wrong, which is great. But sometimes, especially after 8 years, like that's most of a decade. Like that's so long.
Yeah. That's a pretty good run for a gaming group,
amazing.
too.
You should be
Yeah.
very proud of yourselves. But like seriously, just like check in with everyone. Like, hey, we will continue to be friends. Like our friendship is not contingent on you being in this game. Like we should find ways to stay in touch. But if we are staying friends outside of this, would you still want to play the game
Yeah.
or a game? Because I think that's a really important choice. Because I've been in that situation before where there's something, a game or a group or whatever that I just like didn't really want to do the thing anymore, but I really loved the people.
Yeah.
And I have a problem conflating with people valuing me with conflating with what I do for them. And so I'm like, oh, if I don't do that thing anymore, they're not going to be my friends anymore.
Yeah.
Wow, tonight is honest. Tonight is an honest podcast. Wow.
But, I mean, that's valid. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really good. Yeah. And I would also say I was not as quick to say the suggestion because of we want something with more rules aspect to it. But there's also, like you said, if the thing is like, hey, maybe we're not feeling this particular activity, but we want to be friends still, and maybe you like having this time to meet as friends, and it's more the prep you're doing in between, especially that's the frustrating thing, maybe consider talking about playing a board game or something instead of a role-playing game that is something like, again, honest discussion amongst yourselves, like what you're actually looking for. But there are a lot of like, especially like legacy board games where maybe you might get all the same vibes you would get with role-playing, and you would get a lot of structured rules, but you wouldn't have a person who feels the obligation to be the prepping GM, and that might be a possibility as well.
Yeah.
So I've heard a lot of people talk about like a lot of these games. I've never played a legacy game, so I don't know what the vibe is like going onward, but I know a lot of people who do it, and it feels like it scratches the itch for them that playing like a role-playing game would.
Yeah. Or, I mean, you might in that conversation discover people are emotionally just kind of taxed at the moment. They don't want all those role playing. Maybe they just want more mechanics because they just want to go kill things.
Yeah.
Like, we want to just a dungeon crawl. And maybe that's a very different game to prep. Like, honestly, you can go find a bunch of dungeons and just kind of like do what's... Like we just read, people make dungeons and adventures that you have very little prep that you need to do. You download it on the internet. A lot of times it comes with maps and everything, especially nowadays. It's like most of them are optimized for virtual play. So then you're just there and you open up the PDF file and you hit share or whatever it is in D&D Beyond or whatever. And you're suddenly running them through a dungeon. You had to do very little prep. Maybe you read it a little bit ahead of time. And they're getting exactly what they want, this very dungeony, killy thing experience that they might be looking for more than like a heavy roleplay game right now.
Yeah.
Because that isn't always the code for I want more mechanics is not always code for I want to fight things more, but I have found, at least in a lot of conversations, that it often is.
Yeah. That was what I was thinking also. Like, yeah, I think like this Dungeons Key game we just mentioned sounds like great for that.
Yeah.
I also think that that's also why a board game is like structured, and you don't need like the board is kind of the GM.
Yeah.
So, and maybe there's a video game that you guys can play multiplayer on that you all would like and you would want to play as well. And it's like you're still having the friendship group and the connection.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, and then maybe after a while, maybe someone will go, you know what, I've kind of things have settled down for me now. I want to run a game again, and then like you do that instead of like forcing everybody to do it in a way that gets everyone frustrated. And I would love to hear a follow up on this and how this works out for Rick, but I do think that's a pretty general. I think there is something about sometimes people just are spent, and it's okay.
Yeah, and like, hey, why don't we take a break for 2 months and we'll all check back in on this day or whatever. And sometimes people drift off of the hobby and they often come back to it, and that's happened to most of the people I know at different
It's
points
happened to me
in
a
their
couple
lives.
times, yeah.
Yeah, same. And I think that's something that we need to allow to have happen without taking it like personally as like, hey, they don't want to spend time with us anymore. It's like, no, it's not that necessarily.
Yeah.
You might also want to check out some GM-less games.
Yes,
is the
that's
other
a good
thing.
one. Yeah.
Like there's a lot of belonging, outside belonging, no dice, no masters. There's a lot of different
Alice is missing.
yeah, like avenues for it now. It's becoming more and more popular. And there's a lot of them. Some of them are pretty crunchy.
Yeah.
So finding something like that where you don't have to be the sole GM might be something to look into as well. And asking on the Discord is definitely a great place for that because they know so many games. Oh my gosh, do they know so many games?
Yeah.
I'm like, I messaged this morning. I'm like, hey, does anybody have like this random game based on this thing from like the 2000s? And they're like, oh yeah, this here, right here. I've got the PDF. Blah blah blah. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
magic. It's magic. It's amazing.
And like if you want Dungeon Crawl, if you like going back to the board game session, either like something like Hero Quest, if you can find like a copy of that to play like through, or I was gonna say like a deck builder card game might also be something up your alley, where you're getting that kind of like strategy and combat vibe, but it's very structured based on card rules and stuff like that. So there are lots of options. And again, yeah, the Discord, I think, will probably be able to set you the right, like, find out the flavor everybody wants and why they want that flavor, and then maybe you can find something that's more tailor made to your current group's needs.
I think also there's an element of, as a GM, you have to be a little bit selfish. So as someone who is a people pleaser, and I do things like I do things for people to show that I care about them, I am very apt to take on things that I'm not interested in myself to please other people. This has happened to me a couple of times with GMing, where I'm like, oh yeah, I would love to run, not that I would love to run it, but you want to play this, I can GM it. I'm not really interested in GMing it, but I will for you. And for like a one shot or something, that's fine. But for an ongoing campaign, that sounds like it has the potential to continue for quite some time. I would not recommend you taking on a game that you are not passionate about.
Agreed.
Especially if you're not already passionate about GMing. Taking on GMing and then taking on a world or system that you are also not passionate about is going to be terrible. It's going to be awful. It is going to contribute to the decline of your playgroup and may, in fact, be the final thing that makes it implode. So I honestly would be like, it's better to end on a good note than to have you try and like drag it along and make it not do well. But if you do want to take up GMing, I always encourage people to try it. And it sounds like you've tried it, but like it's a thing that takes a while to get into.
Yeah.
For a really long time, for my first couple of campaigns, I was so nervous and I dreaded before every single session. I would like have like my imposter syndrome and just like, oh God, I'm going to be terrible. No one's going to like it. It's going to be awful. Oh my gosh, what if they do this? What if they... And I was just like, I had to overcome that. And that was something that took for me just repetition. And eventually I found my comfort style and things that really... I built up my confidence with it. So then I started really, really enjoying it. And now I enjoy GMing more than playing now, which I never, ever thought would ever happen. If you go back to listen to young, beautiful, wrinkleless Kimmy from years ago, she was like, oh, no, I'm not a GM. I'm like, I'm a player. I'm a player. And it's come full circle. It is something that you absolutely can learn to like. Some people don't, but it does take practice. I don't know a single person. Well, no, I probably do know a single people, but like for most people, it takes a while to build up those muscles to be comfortable with it. But you have to pick a system that you like. So there's a little bit of like, if you want me to GM, this is the system I'm comfortable GMing.
Yeah.
If you don't want to play that game, that's fine. Let's call it. Because, I don't know, beggars can't be choosers kind of comes to mind. Like, you don't have to be the one who steps up to save the day for everybody and also cater to everything that they're wanting at the same time. That's a lot of pressure to put on yourself.
Yeah, and maybe you can't save a group that ultimately doesn't want to be saved.
Exactly.
So
Or doesn't necessarily need saving. Like,
Yeah.
if people are really moving on in their lives, it sounds like they're trying to there's a lot of stuff happening outside of the gaming group. So it's not gaming drama. It's not
No.
like they're not enjoying it, but they just have to have other priorities. And sometimes that just happens. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's sad. But then you and the other person who's playing can go and be free to go find other gaming groups. And online, if you play mostly online, it's much easier task than people who are trying to play in person. There's a bunch of amazing gaming groups. I've mentioned on here the Open Hearth gaming community. They're really great. The Happy Jacks has a great gaming community. A bunch of different ones
in
online.
fact, Game Days is on March 29th.
Yeah, March 29th. And so there's lots of opportunity, and you might have a lot more enjoyable experience jumping into a more enthusiastic group than trying to pull people along who are not as enthusiastic.
Yeah.
That was a really long rant. Sorry.
No, I think it was great though. There's
Okay.
a lot of really good information there.
Okay,
so,
just
yeah.
and hard one experience.
Concern, yeah. Like I've had gaming groups that have risen and fallen, and like I'm kind of like you. I think that I did not like GMing for a while, and I think I started GMing too soon. And now that I've been doing it a lot more, I'm liking it a lot more. I still like playing, but I think that there is something really fun about GMing, and there's something so satisfying about when your players just do wild, weird stuff. And I think part of it, me, is like figuring out what my GMing style is and what works best for me. And like for me, like prepping a lot is not good for me. I cannot sit and read like a whole, especially when I'm running a module, like prepping and like running through a whole module. I can't stand it. When I'm building my own thing, because I don't put nearly as much work into building my own adventures as I do when I'm reading a module, because like it's boring to me. And I will prep. See here with me and says what's prepping, which is kind of how I am. Like I do tend to do broad strokes, and then I just like pick a map that that looks good. I'll use that, and that's kind of how I run. So I usually can prep a game within like less than an hour, if I really want to. But I find like I've been running a lot of these pre-built modules for the camps, especially because we're using published campaigns. Yeah. And I find myself like halfway through a dungeon, just like, well, I'm only getting 2 hours, so a lot of this isn't going to happen. Yeah. And it's fine. And it's like, the nice thing about if prepping stresses you out, the one thing I want to stress to anybody who's considering DMing but is afraid of the prep is that the players don't know what you didn't prep. Yeah. They don't know. So like that's the thing. I'm not saying you have to wing it, but I am saying that if you are not someone who loves to just like have a huge ton of things happening, but you feel relatively okay with your improv skills, you can do okay, especially depending on how much time you're building into. But again, so it's very easy. If like let's say if the more rules game you're talking about is D&D, it's very easy to just kind of look for some maps online and then run games. Basically, you don't have to do a ton of prep for that. You can just kind of go like, what's the general like premise here? You also can just rip stuff off from like movies and shows that you like and like twist it in like fun, little fantasy ways, and people get enjoyment out of that. So absolutely, like if maybe there's a way that you can GM that would make you happy, and so there are ways to explore that. But again, at the same time, if you do not want to GM, you do not have to. And I think if you try to do it, then it's not going to be fun for you.
Yeah, I would. I feel like pre-written adventures are a really great kind of mid-step for new GMs. It was a step that I feel like was sorely lacking from my GMing experience. I jumped in with systems that at the time didn't have a lot of that stuff written. I felt the need to be original because a lot of my GMing my learning GM was mostly streamed. Yeah. So I felt like pressure to be like, oh no, I'm setting an example. I need to create a whole thing. And I think I am a stronger GM for that, but I also don't feel like it's a good idea for everyone to jump in the deep end like that.
Yeah, especially if you're not going to be on stream. Yeah.
Yeah. So go find, like, there are so many different people creating so many things for so many different systems now. If you find someone who writes pre-written adventures that you really respond to and like are formatted in a way you like, because I know a lot of the D&D adventures tend to follow the same format and stuff because they have like kind of their style guide that they follow, but the way they phrase things, the information they put in little boxes, how much dialogue they give you for different characters, things like that does vary even among those writers. So if you find someone who writes content that you find very easy to translate from the page, like follow them, get their stuff, because often, like, if they've only written one, they're probably in the middle of writing another one. Yeah. Like, most people do not like do an adventure, go through the trouble of making it available publicly and purchasing it so people can purchase it and then never do it again.
Yeah, unless they end up hating the process.
Yeah, unless they hate it. Usually they give, yes.
I wrote one adventure and I did it for a thing when I used to work a saving throw. I did it for a saving throw thing, and I was like, I don't think this is for me. Yeah,
it's hard. It's so hard to do. Yeah. But yeah, it's like that can make the process infinitely easier, and you'd be amazed, like. Morkborg, all these things have so many people. Morkborg. Have so many people writing different content for them, for that game or that system, and all different things. Like our friends wrote Duckborg at Gemroom Games, and it's just like they're in Duckborg. So I don't know. There's just so much stuff out there. You don't have to create it all from scratch, and you should not feel the responsibility or need to do that. Because it's unnecessary. People are out there doing so much of the work for you.
Yeah, and you can find if you're running D&D specifically, the DM's Guild has tons of little adventures people have written and created and stuff like that, and other things too. But yeah, like I love, like, one of the books that really helped me. I always forget what it's called. I think it's Uncaged, and it was like a series of Uncaged, and they were like all based on like mythology and like fairy tales and things like that, but they were and like mythological creatures, and they were all themed around the idea of like stories that tended to be about women that like was like modern spins on these stories. So it was like a Little Mermaid sample, it was like a Sirens thing or whatever, and I found like that one really clicked well with my vibe, and that was a really good one for me to like learn to run stories with. And I'm not saying that same one would for you, but I am saying like find one that like goes, oh, I could do a story like this. It would probably be fun. So, and I mean honestly, like as a professional writer, I tend to not like to do a ton of writing myself because I'm already writing. I want to use my writing energy towards my professional writing.
Yeah.
So that's why when I run stories, I tend to just think of broad strokes. And I've shared on here before that my method of running a D&D or a TTRPG in general is I just think about what would have happened if the characters didn't show up, and that's all I write. And then I let the characters figure out what's going to happen once they show up, and then I just play off of what they do. And that works great for me.
Cool.
Not going to work for everybody. Works great for me.
Yeah.
And like that's easy enough to do, and that I can do that within like an hour typically.
Yeah.
So
That's cool.
yeah.
All right, Rick. Please update us. Let
Let
us
us
know
know.
what's happening.
Yeah.
Did any of our advice help you? Did you use any of it? Did you blow it off and do something completely different? Did someone else step up and jam? No, the whole point is moot. Who knows? All right. Mailbag number 2.
Oh, I want to say this real quickly. This is a thing
Oh,
from
yeah.
the chat. So See You at the Ravine says they were talking to a friend that was gaming curious and told him that copying the plot of an action movie is a good start coming up with an idea for a story. And I think that's very true, especially if you take an action movie and then put it in a different setting.
Yeah.
People are like, by the way, I went to a screening of True Lies this past week. And I will tell you, if you respect women, do not expect it to hold up because it's wild.
Yeah.
But it is a bunch, it's a lot of, especially like 90s era action films are just such a ridiculous series of setups for action sequences.
Yeah.
And so I think like maybe pick a better 90s movie, but I was watching it like, oh, this is like basically a gaming campaign happening. Like, oh, okay, so we're going to go to this thing. That was a weird action scene at the mall. And now we're going to have an action scene that happens, on this bridge and like that kind of thing. So it's very easy to imagine a gaming campaign set around these action scenes.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in space or wherever.
Yeah, people aren't gonna know.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a promenade on this satellite.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's a
That's
Oh, there's
fancy.
there's a bridge between these two structures in the middle of space. There's gonna be a fight on it, and like
Yeah, very cool. That's a great tip. I love that.
that came from the chat. I'm giving them the
Good
credit.
job.
My tip was to then just add the element of the setting you're using. But-
Yeah. All right, mailbag number 2. Dear Kimmy and whomever she's captured to be on the show this week.
Tell them
And
bad
really-
things. Tell them they AB.
And really the Discord too. I'll take all the help I can get. It's Eric from New Jersey again. He has so many games and so little time variety. So I am the type of GM who enjoys a game when my players enjoy it. As long as
Sorry,
I
it's
enjoy...
enjoy.it.
Yeah. I think there's supposed to be the obligatory space behind the
Yeah.
period, so it's enjoy.it. As long as I enjoy the system, it is being run in, and I'll just about play anything. So I don't need any questions of Eric. What do you want to run? Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. My best friend in the entire world and her husband are all about me running a Fallout game. Aside from the 2 episodes of the show and the organic isometric game from decades ago, I know absolutely nothing about the setting. I don't remember the video game all that much. However, I figure I should look into this because people will be all into it as long as I don't use the 2D20. I will have fun. What is the most efficient way to crash course an IP? If you specifically have suggestions for Fallout, all the better. Second question. If I absolutely hate 2D20, which has the official game, trust me, I tried running Star Trek Adventures and hated it. What would you recommend running for it? I can hear our Erica Odd chanting, Savage Worlds, Savage Worlds. And admittedly, I do enjoy running that system. The other option I got was thinking of Jason when he ran the Fallout campaign in Apocalypse World. So that is always an option. I am, of course, open to other options as well. That's pretty much it. I hope in these times that all of you are doing well, or at least that you are there for each other. As usual, stay gaming, stay tipsy, stay diverse. Mugs held high, Eric from New Jersey. P.S. I never know what to say here.
Drink.
Yay!
Okay, so my answer to the first question is wikis. Oh my gosh, it's the best thing ever. If you don't know a setting and you just want to get major things, go to a wiki for Fallout and look up who all the major factions are and read through it. And there's probably also, probably someone's made like primer videos on YouTube about who all the factions are in Fallout because people love doing stuff like that. There's this thing called the internet, and the internet has all sorts of things on the computer about how to like what makes up a world. So I think like you literally could probably Google like factions Fallout wiki and you'll find a list of everything. And that makes it super duper easy. And I mean, the show would definitely help. I would say even just like maybe finish watching the first season of the show, and I think you'll have enough information to run the game from. I mean, Fallout specifically, here it is. 1950s, but post-apocalyptic. That's basically with a lot of nuclear stuff. Like, that's pretty much it. Like, and if you want to, like, use specific elements from the game, like factions and things like that, great, you'll find them on there. But I think, honestly, the trick is just pick a major American town that you like and then drop a nuke on it in your head, in the game. And imagine, like, what would this town look like if it was all rubbled and burned out, and, like, there were, like what things in this town would make, like, monolithic things that they were like found in the future and someone had no idea how they came from. What would St. Louis think about the Arch if the Arch was there but there was no like story behind how it got there? So I think that's like the trick to running Fallout specifically. But I think any other game, I think it again is like just get a wiki, spend a few hours maybe before you start building your game looking at the wiki and figuring out like, because like almost any major IP has a dedicated fan base that will fill out a wiki page for you, and they are essentially your unpaid writing staff. Good job, minions. You didn't even know you were doing it. I'm currently playing in a Fallout campaign using the 2D20 system. I'd be curious what you hate about the 2D20 system, because even though it is the exact same system basically as Star Trek Adventures, I don't think it's as hard to play as Star Trek Adventures. And I do think that, like, I'm wondering if the issue you're having with 2D20 is specifically like the way Star Trek is structured, or if it's actually you just don't like the 2D20 system. Because if you two just don't like the way that 2D20 works as far as like rolling under your numbers and stuff, I get it. I totally get that. I do think the next best thing would be Apocalypse World or Savage World. I don't like Savage World, so I'm usually biased against it. But if you like Savage World and you think it would work, by all means, use it. Apocalypse World, also great for that. But I mean, yeah, the biggest thing is just it's not as hard as you think it is to reskin almost any system to whatever you want it to be. So I think that like if there's a system you really personally like to run that's not 2D20, I would say just use that system. And just like for example, you know, D&D is the easiest one to use with this case. All you have to do is go, okay, if it's not magic, what is it? Oh, it's high-tech stuff. Okay, cool. Instead of a fireball, it's a gun that shoots a fireball, like that kind of thing. And like just anything that's like magical. If it's a system that you want to use that uses magic and you want to put it in a world that doesn't have magic, just figure out like, okay, in this case, what I'm calling fire is radiation or something like that. So it's really it's way easier than people think it is to kit bash a system. It just means however much more work you want to do. And the biggest thing is going to be how much you like running that system. And so I think the issue that I have with Apocalypse World, which we'll get into more in the next email, is that I do think that as much as I love PBTA games, I think any ongoing campaign starts to run up against the like the like invisible walls of the system.
Yeah.
And that's the concern. But even I mean, honestly, the Fallout 2D20 system also has a pretty limited level of levels that you can get through. But I'm playing it. I'm quite enjoying it. But I also am playing with someone who knows how to run. My GM has been running Star Trek Adventures for so long. They know the system pretty in and out. So maybe that's why. But
That makes sense.
But I mean, maybe again from the previous email, if you hate the system, you're never going to enjoy running it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest that. And yeah, I would be interested in having you share specifically about it, because like Jason right now is running a Spelljammer campaign, and he does not like. He's very finicky about his D&D opinions, by the way.
Yeah.
So he doesn't like. He likes 2D10. Because of the bell curve better. Like, he doesn't like rolling a d20, so he rolls 2d10.
Yeah.
And that feels better to him, and that basically has redeemed his entire opinion of D&D.
Yeah.
So is it, like, something small, like a bell curve on the dice that you could, like, modify or switch around? Or is it something, like, rather saying fundamental with the system?
Yeah.
I would actually... I love Fallout. But I tend to avoid running things in set IPs. One thing I would suggest is if your players know the world inside and out, like farm some of the work out to them.
Yeah.
When I was running the One Ring campaign, which is like Lord of the Rings, it was interesting because I had Kai at the table, and he is like we speak Elvish together. We're Elvish friends. And then there's Dave, who's like, I saw the movies once, so it was very different, and it was interesting because Dave learned about like Middle Earth through the eyes of a dwarf that he was playing, which was absolutely fascinating to watch and really one of my very favorite things about that campaign. Because he did the same thing. He I think I'll play a dwarf. And then literally as he started playing that character, fell into the wikiverse of the world. And by the end of that campaign, he was like, yeah, and man, the dwarves of the Second Age and blah, 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 and then he was telling me stuff that I didn't know because I'm more of an elf person. I'm sure you're all shocked. But it was fascinating. So if your players know the world, have them help you.
Yeah.
Have them, okay, I'm running whatever the system ends up being, and have them, all you need to know is where they are. So you make up a town and then have them create their characters. They will probably fill it with a bunch of lore that you don't already know.
Yeah.
And you can read their character sheets and be like, oh, I see what this is now. Okay. And learn about it. And then just ask them how they interact with the world. So if you go spend, 10 minutes playing Fallout again, run around, whichever version of the game you're playing, and run around the town, you kind of see the aesthetics and how people interact.
And by the way, the version of the game you're playing should be Fallout New Vegas, just letting you know. It's the best Fallout game there is. So just giving you a heads up. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I just I have so many Fallout opinions, but I'm like, this is not what this is about.
Fair.
Roll it back, Kimmy. Roll it back.
They're all about how good New Vegas is.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, I really wanted the one that was in Boston to be good.
Yeah.
It had a dog.
That is the bummer about the RPG, is the RPG is set in Boston, which is
Oh.
not, but it is. But I mean, also maybe not a bummer because you get to have fun with what the
Yes.
game didn't do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. That one was just. One's good, the next one's bad. One's good. It kind of
Yeah. I need a New Vegas port that works on my PS4. That's what I need.
Yeah. But okay. So sorry, I was going back.
My fault.
No,
my fault.
it's
I
great.
interrupted you.
No, yeah. It was very entertaining. I appreciated it. And your input about Fallout is always welcome. But yeah, and have them describe what's happening. You interact that way. And then feel free to ask them. If you listen to our One Ring campaign, I ask Kai stuff all the time. I was like, wait, do I have the timeline right here? Was this happened before this? And then we talk about it. So it's okay. You don't have to know absolutely everything about the world. That's okay. It's all right. Take a breath. I know there's that pressure to do that, but don't do that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you a super weird left field. Like you said, you liked Savage Worlds. I could see a world where you could reskin parts of Savage Rifts to be like a Fallout game. Because you've got the Glitter Boys with their big armor. You'd have to tweak it a little bit. You've got this gambit of everything. There's everything in Rifts. So you could definitely pull stuff and reskin them fairly easily, I think, to get something that could very easily read as Fallout. Now, if your players are expecting, I expect, the armor to have exactly all the same powers as they do in Fallout, and you're like, well, Glitter Boy power is a little bit different. But whatever it is, I think that could be a pretty easy reskin for you. But I also can not guarantee, but almost guarantee that somebody on the internet has probably already done this work for you.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. I was looking, literally everything in the world exists if you look long enough on the internet. I was looking for, Deadland is Fallout adjacent. Yeah, with Western theme. You probably pull from both, honestly. There's a bunch of stuff. So if you're pulling bits from Rifts and bits from Deadland, you probably have a very, very vibes, actually pretty accurate version of it.
Yeah.
The other thing, but again, I was I'd like to play Shadowrun, but I don't want to play actual Shadowrun. And literally, I was Googling around. There's a million reskins of a bunch of other systems that are Shadowrun. Shadowrunners is the PBTA. I think it's Blades in the Dark. I don't know. One of them that's you're basically Shadowrun, but not with that system. So there's stuff out there for everything. And Fallout is such a big fandom.
Yeah.
I'm sure people have done it.
Yeah, because I know it's the same thing true with Star Wars. Like, yes, there have been multiple official Star Wars RPGs, but it's also 1,000 hacks of other games that are designed to be used with Star Wars, so you can do that easily. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think if you look for it, you'll find it immediately.
Yeah.
But it is, I will say, it's a very fun system to play in. It's a very fun world to role play in. The game that I'm playing in right now. I'm playing a Miss Nanny robot whose name is Mrs. Featherbottom. I think that's right.
Yeah.
It's something like that. But she is, and the joke is that I keep doing like bad mishmashes of various British Isles accents with her. And the premise of her character is that she was a nanny, and the child she was caring for is missing, but she is also defective, and so she doesn't remember the child's name or what happened to them. And so everything, like a lot of the things she does in the game are her like thinking she's caring for a child, but is actually like cooking like scavengers, be like, oh, I've got to warm the bottle up for the baby, and like it's just her blasting, and like it's so fun to play her.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
It is such an interesting universe, which is one of the reasons I think the games have stayed interesting and relevant for so long. And it's so interesting that they like base them around different places.
Yeah.
Because you can have that same world, but you jump to a different place, and it's a very like same general vibes, but very different specific things, which is how it would be in real.
I haven't played it yet, but somebody made an entire fan like edit video of game that is Fallout UK. It's completely fan created, and they didn't just like do a 1-to-1. They like actively thought about things. Like, I can't remember now. They used something different instead of caps. It's like tickets for the metro or something like that replaced caps. And so they didn't just go like, okay, it's British bottle caps. Like, no, what would be the bottle cap equivalent in the UK? And so, and like it's like a really well developed fan mod, because like they even like got 2 of the actors who have played the Doctor on Doctor Who to do like voices of doctors in the game.
That's
and like
so cool.
yeah, so I've heard it's incredibly good.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, it's one of those things that I think, I know like most of their fan base is probably in the US, so there's a reason they keep it kind of US based with like the 50s nostalgia.
Yeah, it's also very like, it's very much a criticism of the American dream.
Yes.
So it's like it's fun that someone made a version of it, but it's very much a American dream cynical twist.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like when you get into the dark side of the world with like so just so you know, Eric, so each vault has its own experiment.
Oh, the vaults are so good!
Yeah, so every vault has its own thing, and you can actually go look them up, and most of them have been like sussed out or discovered. There's a couple of them that are still unknown what their experiments are.
You can always have like, oh, there's the vault no one knew about before. Right?
Yeah. But the corporation that runs them all like did a specific thing for each one. Like if you see in the show, there's like the different vaults that do swaps with each other, which is I think that's the only vault I've heard of that has connection with other vaults before, and that was part of the experiment on that set of vaults.
Yeah, each vault's like a controlled experiment.
Yeah, about something completely different, and some of them,
There's one, I think it's in 3,
yeah,
where I think it's Fallout 3, where the whole vault is clones of one guy named Gary, and when you go to look, it's like Gary, and like all I can say is it's so good. Yeah,
it's so weird. Yeah, and it's just like this dark.
Yeah.
Like funny, but also dark, like undertone to the whole thing. And I think that's kind of if you're running a Fallout game, that's the vibe you have to capture. This sort of madcap, sort of silly.
Yeah.
But underneath the silly, like this veneer facade of like silly kind of 50s nostalgia is like dark truths about like the American dream
and
capitalism and how like
power.
Experiments on humans like treat each other. It's just very, very interesting.
I think that the reason why Fallout appeals to me so much as a storyteller and as a player and as a gamer is that my exact perfect Venn diagram is where dark and silly meet, and this does it so well. It does such a great job of making things silly until something like, oh, that's so messed up.
Yeah.
And it nails that tone perfectly, which is, I think, why it appeals to playing a role-playing game, because you can do such, like I said, like my character might have a very tragic story about this missing child, but it's so funny to play her as like doing things. Like one point I was trying to make a sled to carry like a hurt person, and I failed my roll, and so my GM rolled it that I built a crib because I didn't know what else to build with the wood that I had.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the vibes for that. But
this is at least the second time that you and I have been on the show together, and all we've done is just ramble about a Bethesda game that we love so much.
I love This
Yeah.
means so much.
Yeah, we had that one day where we went off of Skyrim for quite
Oh
a
my
long
god,
time.
so
Yeah.
long. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's the vibe you got to capture with Fallout. Whatever system you use, whatever thing you skin, whatever it is, that's the undertone of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Your players will care about vibes more than they care about system. In my
yeah,
opinion.
or you knowing every little thing about the world. And
Yeah.
again, it is okay to ask.
Yeah.
Like, it is like you're making your little town or using one that's already existing, whatever one you want, but ask them like, oh, how would your character feel about this? Or ask them straight up lore questions. Like, how would a scavenger, like, would they do this? And if they're like, no, they're okay, and pivot a little bit. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
So definitely don't feel like you have to know everything. Because I was able to run a Lord of the Rings game for Kai, and if I can do that, anybody can run a game for a player that knows more than they do.
Yeah, and like Jason has said on the show before, you treat your characters like character sheet and like backstory as a wish list.
Mm-hmm.
So like things they put on their sheet are things they're looking to do in the game. And so if someone gives you a sheet full of lore about their character, now you know what wiki things to look at more closely, because you're like, oh, these are the things that they're really excited about, so I want to build my game around them.
Yeah.
And I also think, like, especially if Fallout, which has such defined like specific monsters, like the super mutants and stuff like that, I think it might be good to go online and like figure out how those characters talk, because like that will do you a lot of good, just to have like specifically people will want those and like invoke those kind of things.
Yeah. The thing, using wikis, this is a cheat that I actually have from something completely unrelated to gaming, but I just thought of it and it might help you. Read a bunch of wikis about Fallout. Follow that weird, very familiar to me ADHD path of I'm going to Google this random question, and then 5 hours later I'm like, oh, I should have dinner and stop reading about this random thing from Mesopotamia or whatever it is. But do that. Follow that little rabbit hole down into all the things that you find interesting about Fallout. Take 2 weeks and don't look at any of it. And then see what you remember. What
Yeah,
things do
good
you
call.
find most interesting about that world that like stuck in your brain? Because that's probably the thing that you should make the core of your campaign if you're going to run it. Because that's obviously the thing that your brain is like, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to hold that and keep it there. Because then you aren't going to be trying to remember details of something that in the moment while you were planning you thought was interesting. You're going to actually be holding on to long-held, like permanent knowledge that your brain thought was interesting.
Yeah.
And that might be a much more, a much stronger foundation for you to build a campaign off of than things that in the moment sound like they might be a good game from a wiki.
Yeah, and also with Fallout specifically, because it's a world that is post-apocalyptic and kind of spread out and disparate, like even if your version of things isn't quite the same as what's on the games they've played or the show they've watched, that's kind of okay, because you can play it off as like, oh, this organization might be connected. Like, it's not like today where everyone has the internet and can connect, and everyone has there's not a McDonald's in every city like there is here. Like, you can very much be like, oh, this is how this particular org like developed or changed in this area. It doesn't have to feel like part of the whole purpose of the setting is that there's not a national organization that connects things very well. In fact, when the Brotherhood of Steel appeared on the TV show, it was like kind of a weird thing to be like, and they're very different on the show than they are in the game because they're a different faction. So you can kind of be like, oh, the factions in the setting that we're using are like, oh, we're playing in Seattle. Well, things are a little bit different in Seattle than they are in DC or Boston or in California. And well, I'm gonna lean into that a little bit, because this area is where this kind of, it's a little bit more isolated and things are going to be the way they are.
Yeah.
So that's the thing to lean into.
Yeah, we did that with our Vault 818 game. Like, we put it in North Hollywood. Like, there is not a Vault 818 if you look in the actual lore of Fallout, but we were in the area code 818. So we were to use the area code. And a lot of it was informed, like, we were all like the descendants of movie stars, because they are the ones who made it in the vault.
Oh, I like that.
So I was like Vin Diesel's like great grandkid, and like, I don't know. It was like,
I love that.
Yeah, it was very silly and weird.
So the whole vault's your family.
Well, some of them were.
That was Vin Diesel.
Yeah. Everything's family. Yeah. I was very much that character, actually.
Yeah.
And I like had like the old muscle car / armor that I had like built, and like, yeah, it was very informed by where we placed it, and it had like some of the canon stuff in it, but it was also very unique. And Jason made up a lot of stuff, even though a lot of us knew Fallout well. like, it was a very different game than one that would be in Boston or anywhere else. So yeah, pick a place that hasn't been touched yet and like have fun with it.
Yeah, I think the combo of your suggestion about reading the wiki, taking a break, and seeing what sticks out in your mind, and then also reading what sticks out in your players' sheets and backstory, you combine those two things and you're going to end up with a game that everybody's really excited and happy about.
Yeah.
I guarantee it.
Yeah. It's just fun. And they're going to have fun. They're going to appreciate you running the game for them. Like, they're your friends. Like,
Wait, sorry, you used to race?
yeah.
Okay, like car race?
Yeah, I used to actually do drag racing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You
I
just
had-
become cooler and cooler every time I hear it. Yeah. I
I used to be cooler. It was in the past. But
Now you
yeah.
do it on page.
But that was actually one of the most fun things about that game is I got to be like my armor was based on my '67 Barracuda, so it was all like this like sort of rusty baby blue color. That was also the most fun I've ever had playing. Like I usually play like very type A smart kind of characters because I don't know. I guess I'm not a great role player. I just have to be by myself all the time. I just call myself smart. Yeah, I don't know. You get what I mean.
You're a teacher. You're allowed to call yourself smart.
Okay. But for that one, I had so much fun just playing someone with like very naive, very like not a very super high IQ. That was also just like the most heartwarming person. It was
Yeah.
so much fun.
I do tend to fall into kind of a few different similar roles, but it is very fun once when I play something that's so out of that and very fun and has some things that's very cool.
Yeah. I am legit working the next like version of like the system with Starscape for the Trust is 100% going to be like a Fast and the Furious take. Like
that's so
it's not,
good.
it can't be Fast and the Furious because that's like copywritten, but it is going to be like something about family and you belonging to this street racing group. And I just am so excited about that. But I have to finish Starscape before I can touch it.
Yeah, I will say on that note of like a Fast and the Furious type game, but it's not Fast and the Furious. Like with Fallout, you also can talk to your party, your players, and like, do you specifically want to play Fallout, or do you want to play a game that has the vibes of Fallout? Because you also could then just create a game, like create a setting that's kind of more your own thing and works fine. That might be harder work for you, but it might make you feel less like you have to know everything about a certain setting. So that's another option.
Yeah.
But should we move on to the next letter?
Sure.
This is a long one. I'll start it, but if you think that I need to be relieved at some point, you can feel free to tap me out. But I'm going to try my best to go through it.
Fantastic.
It is almost 2 full pages.
It
so
is.
yeah.
Why don't we just plan and switch halfway through?
Okay.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Mailbag number 3 from the archive, 2019, so long ago.
I mean, it really
In
kind
the
of
dark times. It does. It feels like a very strong divide, with
Yes.
like pre and post.
Pre and post, yeah.
All right. Happy greetings, Jackers. First, I try to limit how long this message gets, but failed horribly, so interject or take a drink whenever you need. In my early gaming years, I preferred point-buy skill systems for the simple fact that they allowed me to reflect the character idea in my head in game mechanics. Different systems achieve this to different degrees, but overall, I never felt a huge pull towards class-based systems like D&D. One day, I stumbled over Happy Jack's RPG and pinched a bunch of shows until I listened to your mass campaign. The PBTA system intrigued me a lot, and soon after the show ended, I started my own Apocalypse World campaign. A lot of play for Apocalypse World these days.
Yeah.
Found great players and became friends out of game with some of them. And as any long-running game, it had its ups and downs, but overall, we had fun, and so it's a success, in my opinion. By now, PBTA has become my favorite system, and your podcast sparked my fiery love for it. I thank you a lot for that. But what baffled me during discussion about class-based systems a while ago was how much love PBTA got from some discussion participants, while D&D got so much vitriol. Sure, I have fun playing D&D and similar systems occasionally, but it's nothing more. In my opinion, the difference in the value judgment is still unearned, though at least not reasonable justified in this context. I propose the following thesis. PBTA is a class-based system similar to D&D. It doesn't matter how classes are named. Call them playbooks, archetypes, themes, or whatever. I think that's true. I think that's not like really a argument. But
Put a pin in that for now.
yeah, I think how it handles it is differently, but yeah, pin. We'll get into that now. Here's my reasoning. Character classes in RPGs are used to differentiate and often limit the abilities and aptitudes of game characters. That may detail aspects of background, social status, promote, restrict in-game behavioral patterns, etc. Classes usually represent archetypes or specific careers. This is largely derived from Wikipedia. It makes sense to me to define it this way. I'll use Apocalypse World as reference because it's the original PBTA game and the familiarity of the system. Okay. PBTA differentiates characters by giving special moves to each of them, as well as unique in-game resources like gangs, holdings, establishments, etc. Which playbooks represent which social status is either obvious or players get an option to choose. Just compare a hard holder to the child thing. I actually haven't played much Apocalypse, so I'm a little bit off some of these. A huge part of character background is established in PBTA, example, by using their unique HX questions for the other players. Depending on which playbook moves a character has, different in-game approaches to solve problems are pushed. A Skinner usually has much more incentives to try the social route, while a Gunlugger is more likely to succeed if they choose an aggressive or combat route. I assume it's unnecessary to present further explanation that playbooks represent different archetypes and often also careers. So my conclusion stands. PBTA games definitely are character classes. Therefore, we can throw the argument into the trash bin that D&D sucks because it has classes, but PBTA doesn't. I'm going to do one last one, and then I'll hand it off to you. Then how to explain the disparate value judgment. A cynical D&D fanboy might say it's the general disliking of anything mainstream, aka hipsterdom. But we don't do this here. No. If it's not the absence of classes, maybe it's how they work.
All right. Continuing. An argument based on mechanics I can see is, in Apocalypse World, all characters can develop moves from any other character classes which fit your character and make them unique. But D&D has a similar rule. It's called multi-classing. Sure, it's more restrictive than Apocalypse World because the power curve is much steeper in D&D, and high-level abilities are only available if you have enough levels, while Apocalypse World characters tend to gain additional options instead of getting more powerful. But the concept is still the same. This might be a point, though. D&D built huge power progression into leveling. Basically, it's a growth from the beginning, a smack normie to becoming superheroes. Apocalypse World doesn't do that. While at a high level, a character has way more alternatives to approach a given situation, the chance of success isn't much higher than for a newbie. If they have a fitting move, if a player doesn't plan for such a progression in their character concept or doesn't want to, they might feel unjustly pushed into that direction. Another important argument can be that abilities and skills a character earns heavily. Let me try this sentence again. I was gonna circle a part, and I thought I could do both at the same time, and I cannot read and circle other places on the paper. I don't know why I thought I could do that. Another important argument could be that abilities and skills a character earns is heavily combat focused in D&D. While there are some, especially spells, their number is small compared to the variety of combat abilities. Apocalypse World has a much more flexible approach, and many moves can be applied to different situations. For example, I've seen the A arresting Skinner move be used to stun a gang during combat, as an enhancer during a performance to get the attention of an NPC character the character wanted to talk to, but also to distract guards from a nearby break and by different characters. So my provisional conclusion is twofold. First, one reason is language. D&D explains in detail where and how an ability can be used and to which effect, giving much more predictability to players. Many Apocalypse World moves can be interpreted in many different ways and therefore creatively applied, assuming the MC goes along. Second, the other reason has nothing to do with the system itself. People might not necessarily dislike the class system, possibly even the system as a whole itself. They just like the playstyle D&D is designed to cater to. In that case, the classes are more or less a straw man they burn instead. I hope I can spark some introspection and discussion with this. Where do you see the flaws in my argumentation? Do you have different ideas from your points of view? Also, please talk about why, especially if you disagree and agree for other reasons. I wish you many hours of gaming, a strong liver with drinking, and lots of fun indulging each other. Greetings from Germany, Falco.
You had a pin, so I want to give you deference.
So many pins.
Yeah.
Okay. I also want to preface this with 2019 was yes, we were super newer to the PBTA system. I think masks, we beta tested masks. That campaign we did was a beta. Masks had not even been released, I don't think yet, or it had just been released or something. So it was still very early in the PBTA lifespan as a genre, as a system of gaming. So yeah, we were very much riding high. It was new. It kind of changed the way a lot of us thought about games in general. Like up until then, one of the things that we'd been playing that was kind of a newfangled system was Savage Worlds. Like it was something that seemed very rules light and free form compared to a lot of more traditional RPGs that we'd play, because we come from playing like Traveler and L5R and some other ones. But there was kind of this mid-generation game that included like Savage Worlds and stuff. And PBTA was just kind of like, it just seemed so different and new. So I will honestly admit that there was probably a little bit of like
Of course there was.
hipsterness, like, oh, this is the cool new thing. Like, we love this. But yeah, the pin that I wanted to go back to
was about classes, right?
Oh, yes.
Saying that playbooks are classes.
Yes. So this is going to be kind of like the meat of my decision. And I would not have felt or known this in 2019 until I started like really digging into PBTA games to design one myself. The difference between a good PBTA hack and a less good one, because it's so easy to just reskin Masks or reskin Apocalypse World and call it something else, is that a playbook in PBTA should be a character arc, not a class.
That's fair. I agree with you on that.
Yeah, you should be able, because like in D&D, when you build a character, okay, I make a paladin because I always make a paladin. I love paladins and fighters in D&D. Like, I don't know what their story's going to be. I know what their past has been. I know what they can do now. I have no idea where they're going to go or what they're struggling with until I create that. If you pick a playbook in a good PBTA hack, you kind of know what's going to happen. If you pick up the Doomed in Masks, you know that you're a character struggling with a set of powers that are eventually going to destroy you. So are you going to use them? Are you going to burn bright as, you know, or are you going to use all the power you can to save as many people as you can? Are you going to try not to use your power to try and prolong your own life? Like, there's all these questions, but you know the general shape of your character's arc. So you do have choice in that. But that's the big difference between a PBTA playbook and a character sheet in Dungeons & Dragons.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
And as someone who likes both systems and
Yeah.
is a bit of a D&D apologist, I do agree with that. I think that at its core, I think that the kind of stories that are best told with PBTA are not the same kind of stories that are best told with D&D. I think that even if you are like me who does not think D&D needs to be a super combat heavy game, I don't disagree. There are lots of rules for it if it does happen, and it is designed to let it happen if it needs to. I don't agree with the point. Well, let me focus on the character story thing first, and we can come at the other point as we come to it. But to focus on this one topic, I agree with you. I think that when you're playing a PBTA game, yeah, you're building an archetype with an arc. I think I agree with you. The best PBTA games that I have played are ones that do kind of have a story. I think the best PBTA games have a set ending, like a not necessarily like scripted ending, but like we are playing this amount of games over this amount of time, and we're going to tell this story, and then we're kind of done with that. Because I do feel like, I'm not trying to say drawback or limitation. Those aren't the right words, because I think it's not a flaw with the system. It's what the system is designed to do, is to tell a contained type of story, a genre story within a specific, like, not just specific genre, but it's a different type of like story in that genre. So like Starscape is not just a space story. It's not just a space opera game. And I'm sorry to use your game as an example.
No, it's totally fine.
Starscape is a story about relationships between people in space stories. So you're going to get stories that are much more character drama based than you might in a different sci-fi hack for Apocalypse World or Powered by Apocalypse. So, and similarly, like Monster Hearts is a very different monster game than Monster of the Week. And if you're looking to play a monster hunting game and you're using Monster Hearts, you're going to find yourself a little bit disappointed. But if you're looking for a game where you flirt with and bang monsters a bunch, you might be disappointed with Monster of the Week. So like every game, it's not just a specific genre, but it's a different type of story in that genre. And as a result, all of the playbooks in those games are designed to fit that type of genre story. And it can be frustrating if you don't come into a game aware of that and you're trying to make the game do something other than what it says on the tin, basically.
Yeah.
Whereas like I think that's also true about D&D, but I do think D&D lends itself a little bit more to a story that might go on for a long time and build, because the basic arc in D&D is, wow, my character gets more and more powerful and kicks some more and more ass. And it does require you to bring a lot more of your own story and the vibes you want to bring to it. Whereas a good PBTA hack kind of does the vibes for you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a good point.
Yeah, I mean, that's
wrap up.
that's the point of it, is
Yeah.
like, D&D is much more open-ended, which is one of the reasons I think it's lasted so long, because you can, like, and you can reskin it with so many different things, because it is something that is so changeable. If you're playing Masks, excuse me, and suddenly you want to switch it up and you want to go to a totally different style of game, it's really hard to do, because it is, well, the system the GMing style tends to be much more like open worlds, like improv style. A lot of times people GM that game. The actual game is on pretty set rails, because that is how you get something that recreates genres so well. So that's definitely a thing. And like you were saying earlier in the podcast, you kind of run into those invisible walls,
Yeah.
like much sooner in PBTA games, which is absolutely true. And I think it's something that, especially in 2019, I'm not sure a lot of people had really realized.
Yeah.
Because there weren't that many like Powered by the Apocalypse systems out yet, and most of the ones that, at least that we'd heard of, were pretty good and pretty well playtested, so it was harder. You didn't hit those walls until a little later. And then now that we've, like, so many hacks are out, like, it is very easy sometimes to pick up a hack that you're like, oh, you just renamed these things a little bit, and it's exactly the same except renames. So I think, yeah, I think that's one of the things. And I think one of the points that they make in the email too is like, in D&D, like you were just saying, that they have a lot more power and it's designed for that. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from people who don't like PBTA or who have kind of burned out on PBTA, or what the person says, like Apocalypse doesn't do that well. High-level character has way more alternatives to approach a given situation. The chances of success isn't much higher than a newbie. And that's a mathematical issue I have with PBTA.
Yeah.
Because it is very possible, and this is one of the reasons I think a lot of PBTA campaigns don't last that long unless they're like really in the feels campaigns. Those ones tend to last a little more because they don't rely on those rules as much. But it's really, it gets to be a little less satisfying when you're a year or two in and you're like, oh, I'm rolling I have the same exact chance of using this move as I had, my character, in, 3 years ago or whatever it is. And I think that definitely is a hindrance of the system. And yeah, people do say, oh, but you have so many ways you can, or you get stat pluses. Yeah, but the stat pluses are always limited because it really throws the math off very quickly when you start messing with too many stats.
Yeah.
So I think that's another big hindrance to the system. And I think that's something that some PBTA designers, like, I try and push against it. Like for Starscape, I tried to add more things to make it seem like a long campaign. But again, Starscape is also not meant to be about fighting things.
No.
Like, you do fight things, but it is not the focus of the system. So it is like, how do you feel about being with these people for so long? So what people want to see in their progression and their change is different than in games that are meant to be about fighting things.
Yeah.
But there are also people who just don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, that's also a perfectly valid choice. If you're like, no, this is going to be a short-term campaign, or we're only going to go 20 sessions. Okay, PBTA can do that.
Yeah, when I picked up PBTA, it was around the same time. I wasn't doing Happy Jacks back then, but I was getting really into it, and there was kind of this mentality of like, you can tell any story with PBTA. It's a universal toolkit, but and that is technically true. But there's a lot of work required in building the version of PBTA you're using to do that with, and I think it took a while for people to really understand that. Yeah. And I think that's why, like you said, the best people are the one who actually take the time to figure out what the arc of the story they're trying to tell is. And like, it's like Monster of the Week is a great example of one. I think it's a really good game, but I know that for me, like, I don't know if it's a system that I want to run for. I was considering it for a project that I might not do for quite a while. But the problem, Monster of the Week, is like, if you're not running a game where people are hunting down a specific monster every story, like, that kind of after a while feels a little bit like it gets kind of tired, because the game is designed to be like, you look for clues for the monster, and then you eventually fight that monster, and based on the clues you found, you get the details for that monster that you're able to defeat it. And like, if you don't do that after a while, it's kind of like, okay, what is the point of, like, if I'm just trying to make a story about, like, it's not just like, oh, here's how you make a game to make Buffy. Like, it's specifically, here's how you make a game where Buffy fights a different monster every story.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And the problem it runs into, I'm just going to chime in for just a second.
Please do. I'm
Like,
wrapped up.
Buffy the series and Supernatural and all these other series, the Monster of the Week shows that it's meant to recreate, have a bunch of power creep.
Yeah.
And that system doesn't.
No.
And it's like one of the things where it's like, if you're going to keep having people be interested in these storylines, whether they're watching or playing in them, you got to fight more and more powerful things. And it gets harder and harder with the PBTA game because it's sort of, there's a little bit of a bump in, again, ways you can do things, but you hit that bump.
Yeah. And not only do you have power creep, there's also, each of those shows has like typically a season arc that builds towards something. And I think it's really hard in Monster of the Week to do that after a while because the game's not designed to be a game where you have a long, you can do it, but you are kind of kit bashing at that point, or you are kind of working outside of the system itself to do it, because that's not the point of the game.
Yeah.
So,
or you get really predictable when it's like, oh, okay, the first time you kind of do that, it's like, all right, like, oh, well, you know, as the GM, like, all the things they're fighting are connected by this one big bad. And then you're like, oh, well, we took on that big bad. I guess it's like the, quote, like, season 2 of our game. All these monsters, all the monsters it's connected, but it's like you just start getting predictable. I mean, also, those shows also got very predictable. So I don't know if that's a feature or a bug in that system, because it's faithfully recreating those shows. But
yeah, and the reason why those shows were able to last past the predictability is because you care about the characters, and the stories impact the characters in different interesting ways. And I think that's also why games that might be more about getting in the feels might last longer than a game that's about the mechanics of the hunt or whatever.
Yeah, Sam and Dean. That's why we watched for all 14 of those seasons, or 15, or whatever there are. Saw them all. Not sure I'm a better person, or didn't waste a huge amount of my life, but
I can't. I've tried. I can't get to the first season because I know how much more of it there is, and it's just like it's hard with any network show, especially now that has like 25 episode seasons or 20 episode seasons, to be like, oh god, there's 14 of these. That's like thousands of episodes of TV that I have to watch if I do it, and I can't. I guess hundreds, not thousands, but still, it's also just like I can't. Whereas like I could rewatch like old Star Trek syndicated episodes like until but I used to also half watch them. But yeah, I think that. Whereas, like, I think D&D is very much designed more just, like, you can play it more run and gun, and you can just kind of, like, you get more... And even D&D, I do think D&D has a shelf life. I think it's very rare that you get a D&D campaign where the same campaign has gone on. I mean, there are cases of it, but it's very rare that someone... Because you do kind of hit level 20, and you're kind of like, well, that's kind of as far as these characters can go, so we have to start over with something fresh, and otherwise, what else are you going to do? So, yeah. They're trying to do a little better with that with 2024 rules of like, oh, you get epic feats and you get these things, but it's like after a while it does feel like I have hit a ceiling about how good I can get. D&D is just there's a lot more content, there's a lot more there. Yeah. So because it's a broader game, so it's not that limitation isn't there. It's just a wider dome. That's all.
I mean, like in every game, I mean, especially MMOs are a great example of this too. Like World of Warcraft, you'd like hit power cap and then, the next expansion, this time with special weapon thingies. Or, this time, suddenly there's been a special crystal that's been discovered that makes everyone more powerful. It's like, I don't know. There's like every game designer in all of history has dealt with this problem, and show writers, and everybody deals with the power creep problem and what happens when you hit that ceiling, and then whatever you do.
Do you watch Mythic Quest?
Oh my god, yeah!
And like the most recent thing of like making Elysium, like, we're gonna make an expansion where your character goes to heaven. And, like, we have to build an afterlife into our game.
I felt super attacked on like the whole storyline with like the player housing, because player housing is like my jam. I've spent so much, like, I cannot even tell you how much of my life was sucked into Ultima Online just redecorating my house over and over and over again. Yeah. I had the Elvish library in the Elvish town we made, and I redecorated that library like once a month, and it became this running gag with the other people. If you've ever been mocked in Quenya on an online game, it was me. That was me being mocked for my redecorating in character in Tolkien Elvish. I am a very cool person. Can we go back to talking about how I used to drag race? Because I'm a cool person. I'm a cool person.
Yeah.
But yeah, player housing is my...
As someone who's never been a Memoria person, even like in Skyrim, building the house in Skyrim, I'm like, I want all the things. I want the cool tower, the alchemy thing. That doesn't, yeah, that's just, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay, friends. We should end on that very cool note.
Yeah, we're awesome. We're very
So
cool people.
Look at us.
Look how cool we are.
Look how popular. All right. Thank you for joining us for season 35, episode 9. Please support our amazing indie designer of the month, Jean-Luc, from The Dungeons Key at thedungeonskey.com. Thank you to our chat mod, James V, and to our amazing patrons who keep us ad-free and independent. You can join their amazing ranks at happyjacks.org/Patreon. Heads up, Patreon, we have officially moved to the monthly subscription model. Yes, we were on that before, but it was sort of faked because I would like do a content post once a month that you would get charged for. Now we are officially on the subscription model. Fun news too, we also are still grandfathered in to our original Patreon rates.
Oh, that's good.
Which I thought we would lose. I was always told if we ever moved to a regular subscription model, we'd lose our grandfathered in super low percentage that they take. And it seems like I was looking through our account today, it looks like we still have it. So
don't say it into a microphone. They might hear.
Oh God, they might hear. But yeah, we are still paying like the rate from 13 years ago to Patreon, which is amazing. So we pay a lot. Patreon steals a lot less of our money. I mean, correctly takes their share is much lower on our Patreon than on the vast majority of Patreons. So very excited to know that. So I'm still going to be diving in. I still have some questions about it, and I will be posting and letting you know as soon as I have answers to those things. So very excited. So my name is Kimmy. You can find me at Golden Lasso Girl, at Golden Lasso Games, or at happyjacksrpg on Blue Sky and other places. So thank you.
Sure. My name is Riley. You can find me at RileySilverman.com. You can find me on Blue Sky. It's RileySilverman.bluesky.social. Currently still. And on Instagram at Riley Silverman. Look for Tales from the Vortex from Doctor Who from Big Finish Audio coming out next month. You can find my story, Dark Watches of California. And just based on this timing currently right now, I also write for a podcast on the Maximum Fun podcast network, which is an entirely listener-supported network, not unlike Happy Jacks, and is also an employee-owned co-op now. As of about 2 years ago, they became an employee co-op. So it's a great company to work for. Every year we do our annual Max Fun drive, which they are starting this week. Obviously, if you have money to support a channel, you support Happy Jacks first and foremost, of course. If you're already a Max Fun listener or a Max Fun supporter, or you want to do it, if you could throw support towards Troubled Waters, we're one of the smaller shows on the network, and so your donations towards our show keep our show existing, which means I get to keep paying for my health insurance. So I would like it. So if you go to MaximumFun.org/join, make sure when you toss in your donation, you toss a little bit. So just pick Troubled Waters as one of the shows you want to support, because it would mean a lot for me in keeping me solvent. So I'm actually not solvent currently, but I pay for healthcare at least. So.
I love you. Support Riley. Do the thing.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to leave you the song today. It's called Up and Away in the Morning. It's by the world famous Poxy Boggarts. I do want to tell you this song annoys me every time I hear it because it is so fantastic lyrically. And my friend Johnny Breen wrote this song in like a day. And just like, hey, I have never written a song before, but I wrote this song. And it just has the most amazing rhymes. Like, I walked into Bristol with cutlass and pistol. And you're just like,
oh, so good.
God, it's so good. And then he just never wrote another song. It's just like, every time I'm like, ah.
It's like me with writing a D&D adventure. I did one really great one.
Really great. Never do it again. Amazing. All right. So, thank you all. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Now when I was a young man, we lived near the sea strand, and my folks kept a tavern called the Admiral's Head. And old Salts by the fireside would tell of the seas wide, the far foreign shores, and the lives that they'd led. And it's up and away in the morning, oh the tears my poor mother has cried. But the sea it had called me, and you may say I'm balmy, but I went to her just like a bride. And it's up and away in the morning. Well, I walked into Bristol with cutlass and pistol, a new bosun's whistle and a swagger and stride. And without too much censure, I soon was indentured and embarked for adventure on a bright morning's tide. And it's up and away in the morning, with the wind to our backs we will sail. And the ship may well take you from here to Jamaica, where they serve up the rum by the pail. And it's up and away in the morning. After 2 months' hard toil, we've docked in Port Royal, our virtues to spoil or at least to curtail. But the trouble with the boisterous sailors who roisters, their choice is to run or to end up in jail. And it's up and away in the morning, and the salt spray tastes finer than wine. Dawn on the horizon and the size of the prize for the taking of a ship of the line. And it's up and away in the morning. Now some say the sea is a sickness, but we feel the thickness of wits lest we're shortening sail. And we see the sea glitney, forecastle and bowsprit, and our course is well plotted and runs for the gale. And it's up and away in the morning, and though we may never come home, we'll think of it often till the day that our lead-weighted coffins get tossed in the foam. And it's up and away in the morning, and it's up and away in the morning. With the wind to our backs we will sail, and the ship may well take you from here to Jamaica, where the storms and the waves they will toss you and shake you, and you'll do desperate deeds for which God might forsake you. But there's nowhere that we'd rather be. And it's up and away